A single coin falls in the dark. Hear it, that solitary ring. One sound, yet it commands a room, halts a conversation, rearranges loyalties. Ask yourself, when did we decide that a gleam could stand in for trust, and why did we kneel? Once, when gold was God, we built temples of stone and vaults of iron. We whispered prayers to ledgers and balanced books like sacred texts. We did not admit it, not aloud, but our rituals gave it away. We measured time in cycles of harvest and minting. We measured virtue in weights and purity. We judged worth by shine. We called it prudence. We called it progress. But beneath those words lived something older, a hunger, a faith. Picture a market just before dawn, the air cool, the ground damp with mist. Torches cough along the arcade, and merchants arrive like supplicants, boxes strapped to the backs of animals, hands cold, eyes bright. The first coin crosses the first palm, and the day begins. In that hand-to-hand exchange, a promise is forged. Not a promise to a person, but to an idea. That this gleam stands for labor. That this symbol stands for life. Listen to the rhythm as it builds. Bag strings tighten. Scales tick. Voices rise, bargaining and blessing at the same time. It feels ordinary. It is not. A ritual is ordinary only because it is repeated. In those days, not every worshipper was devout, but all were believers. The humble saved what little they could, stashing fragments of light under floorboards like contraband hope. The powerful stacked light by the chestful, by the cartful, by the roomful, building sanctuaries where only a certain key would fit. People told stories of secret chambers and wandering caravans, of lost caches beneath old bridges, of a family's fortune sealed inside a wall and forgotten. The stories weren't just about treasure. They were about penance and reward. They were parables dressed in dust. Why gold? Why this metal? Not because it feeds you, not because it shelters you, because it doesn't rot, because it doesn't rust, because it resists the teeth of time and pretends to be eternal. The human heart would like to be eternal. Failing that, it seeks a proxy. We carved eternity into circles, stamped symbols into them, and called them tokens of trust. Then we passed them around and told ourselves we were rational. There were rules, too, like commandments. Thou shalt weigh without deceit. Thou shalt not clip the edge of the coin. Thou shalt not swear by a shine you have not earned. Markets thrived when the commandments held, and fell quiet when they didn't. Each violation required a ritual of cleansing. Melt the false, smelt the true. Let fire reveal what tongues and seals conceal. The furnace was a judge no one could bribe. Flames do not flatter. But belief never remains pure, and so the second act begins. The scene shifts. The halls grow taller, the echoes longer. Counting rooms become sanctuaries of calculation. The keepers of the vault wear sober expressions and speak in careful tones. Parchment becomes policy, and policy becomes power. The religion of money discovers priests.
These priests do not wear robes. They wear discretion. They memorize numbers like incantations. They convene behind doors heavy as secrets and decide how the river should flow. Flow too much, and the fields flood. Flow too little, and there is drought. Each choice leaves a stain, yet leaves no trace. The river looks the same from the shore, even when its current has been changed. Outside the sanctuaries, the congregation grows restless. Every new temple promises salvation. Every promise requires tithes. People exchange their days for notes that declare themselves to be worth what they are worth because they say so. Faith evolves from metal to writing, from weight to decree, and the leap from what glints in the hand to what declares in the ledger feels small at first, only a step from shine to script, until the ground shifts underfoot and everyone is balancing on belief alone. Fear and desire take turns holding the bell rope. When the bells of gain ring, crowds gather at the foot of the altar with offerings of trust. Traders weave through the aisles, fast and confident, selling certainty by the yard. Prices climb as if gravity has loosened its grip, and the air is filled with the perfume of inevitability. It is thrilling to belong to a miracle. But miracles demand sacrifices. Some give caution. Some give time. Some give their last coin and call it devotion. The flame burns brighter. The shadows lengthen. Then comes the test. It always comes. It comes as a whisper first, a rumor tracing the edges of the market like a cold finger. It asks a quiet question with violent implications. What if the promise fails? One stall closes early. One caravan turns back. One keeper hesitates to open the vault. The whisper becomes a murmur. The murmur becomes a noise. And the noise becomes a stampede. Faith reverses itself with terrifying speed. Yesterday's believers are today's inquisitors. They demand proof, not in words, not in seals, but in sound. Metal on wood, weight on scale. The old God is summoned to adjudicate the new God's claims. Men and women line up with notes in hand like parishioners clutching icons, asking for conversion back into the old faith, the one you can hold. The priests of policy retreat deeper into their sanctuaries, searching for language that can do what weight once did. Their voices echo. The walls do not answer. In the streets, you can smell panic. It smells like sweat and ink. Books are opened, then closed. Locks are tested, then sealed. Somewhere, a small shopkeeper sits on a stool behind a counter, watching the door, the coins hidden under the board beneath their feet. Somewhere, a traveler in a roadside inn counts and recounts, as if the act of counting adds mass to what is counted. Somewhere, a child watches the adults and learns the expression on a face when belief wavers. It is not the first time. It is never the last.
If gold is God, then cycles are liturgy. Boom is a festival, bust is a fast. The faithful sing when harvests are fat, and go silent when fields lie gray. Each time we promise to remember. Each time memory bows to hunger. Yet something else begins to stir in these crises. Something the old religion cannot fully contain. Imagination. A new congregation forms in the back rooms and the alleyways, among thinkers who stare at the bones of the system and see shapes within them. They ask whether value could be anchored not in metal, but in motion, not in purity, but in productivity. They argue that wealth is not what sits in the dark, wealth is what moves in the light. They do not need the altar to bless them. They build new instruments and read futures in their curves, predicting rainfall with numbers and confidence with curves. To the faithful of the old order, this sounds like heresy. To the hungry, it sounds like breakfast. And so the religion of money evolves again. Gold remains in the sanctuary, but its throne grows lower as new altars rise. Some pay homage to trade, some to credit, some to the growing idea that time itself can be minted, that the future can be summoned and spent today. You can hear the arguments like thunder over mountains whose names no one agrees upon. They argue about anchors and floats, about chains and wings. They argue in words, but the world answers in motion. The congregation adapts to whatever feeds it. If weight is food, it will worship weight. If promise is food, it will worship promise. If growth is food, it will worship growth. A religion that wants to survive must keep feeding its flock, and the flock measures faith by fullness. Somewhere, in a room where the windows are shuttered against the noon heat, a circle of traders lean over a table. A single coin sits in the center like a relic. Around it lie contracts, claims, instruments that represent the coin in fragments, in fractions, in futures, each line promising that this piece can become the whole when the chorus sings together. They pass the papers like hymns and debate which voices to put on the lead. It is beautiful in a way, and dangerous in every way. A choir can lift a roof or bring it down. Outside, in a field where birds ride the air and shadows stretch over rows of planted hope, workers lift their heads at the sound of distant bells. The market has spoken again. The price of their harvest has changed, because something changed in a room they will never enter. They do not know the names of the bell ringers. They only feel the weight shift in their pockets. Faith travels, invisible and immediate, and lives are its vessels. Now imagine a corridor carved into cold earth, a vault deeper than sleep. The door is a circle within a square, the old geometry of safety. Inside, lights hum, and rows of shelves hold bars stacked like bricks for a city that will never be built. To stand here is to feel the hum of history. To stand here is to sense a strange confession. It says, we trust the symbol of trust only when we can lock it away. We need to see the God asleep to believe the God is awake.
But even here, in the cold glow, another truth leans against the wall and whispers, this is not the only power. The other power travels at the speed of rumor, at the speed of hope, at the speed of panic. It is lighter than metal, sharper than contracts, and older than any mint, belief. When belief aligns, metal obeys it. When belief breaks, metal is too slow to heal it. The third act begins with a revelation that is not entirely new. What we called God was a mirror. Once a group of elders gathers in a quiet courtyard as the evening cools the stone. They have seen cycles rise and fall, temples built and burned, commandments rewritten on cleaner parchment.
They pass a small piece of gold between their hands, each one feeling the coolness and the reassuring heft. One elder says, "This is certainty." Another says, "This is memory." A third says nothing, only watches the children running along the edge of the fountain. The silent one then speaks. Certainty and memory are not the same, they say. The metal remembers for us. It teaches us to archive our fears and call them prudence. But certainty never sat in our pockets. It sat in our agreements. Every coin that changed hands carried a story with it. Every story was a promise. Every promise stood because two people decided to stand by it. The metal simplified the ritual, but it was never the ritual itself. The others listen. One asks, "If not this, then what?" The silent one smiles at the children. They are inventing games with rules they learned 5 minutes ago, and yet they obey the rules as if they've always existed. The elder says, "We will always choose a God. The trick is to choose one that reminds us that we are the ones choosing." In markets and in monasteries, in boardrooms and in barns, the same drama plays out. Choice disguised as fate. We lift symbols to the sky and tell ourselves the sky put them there. It comforts us to pretend we did not hoist them up. It absolves us when we tear them down. Night deepens over the city. The last stalls close. The last lamps snuff. Somewhere a keeper turns the final key and listens to the tumblers settle. Somewhere a worker hides a small coin under a loose stone and smooths the earth over it with a calm palm. Somewhere a trader, exhausted, leans back and stares through a window at a horizon they cannot name, rehearsing tomorrow's prayers. We are left with a question, the oldest and most modern of all. What is the true sanctuary of wealth? If not a vault, perhaps a vow. If not a bar of metal, perhaps a bond of trust. If not the glow that blinds, perhaps the light that reveals. There will be a time again when crowds gather and ask the altar for certainty. There will be a time again when the altar answers with silence. When that happens, remember this. The silence is not the end of faith. It is the end of forgetting. It is the interval in which we hear ourselves. In that interval, wealth can be reconsidered. Imagine a world where the ritual honors the work before the token, where the measure of prosperity is the resilience of promises kept in harsh seasons, where the altar is not an object but a practice. Imagine an inheritance of habits rather than hoards. Imagine a future in which the old God still gleams but no longer commands, where it sits among many tools instead of a throne.
And do not mistake this for an argument against shine. The human eye has always loved light. But love can be chosen without worship. Love can be a craft instead of a creed. We can choose to craft a money that serves when storms come, that remembers us as we truly are, not as we pretend to be when the bells are ringing and the streets are loud with easy promises. So listen, one last time, to that first sound we began with. A single coin falls in the dark. Hear it again. In that sound lives the story of our devotion and our doubt. It is the sound of a tool becoming a totem. It is the sound of a totem returning to a tool. When gold was God, we discovered what we were willing to kneel for.
When belief became our true altar, we discovered what we were willing to build. Walk away with this. Greed whispers of scarcity. Power speaks of control. Innovation sings of possibility. Legacy asks for meaning. The human caste demands a reckoning with all of them. The religion of money is only as holy as the lives it holds together. If we must keep a faith, let it be in the promise that no one is left outside the temple when the doors close. Tomorrow, markets will open, bells will ring, and our rituals will resume. Tomorrow, 1,000 small vows will be made in the shadows between prices and paychecks. Remember, we are the authors of our altars. We are the keepers of our keys. The God we kneel to is the God we make. And if you must choose a closing prayer, let it be simple. Let our weight be in our word, and our wealth be what we keep safe in one another.